The narrator's life began to fall apart when their sister introduced a new boyfriend to them. Emma's boyfriends were constantly changing, and the narrator had learned not to get too invested in her sister's relationships. When Emma called the narrator to introduce Liam, she barely reacted and told herself another name. The narrator was excited to meet Liam, but was hesitant to introduce him to the family. Liam was tall, broad-shouldered, and had a strong jawline and a confident smile. He was comfortable, secure, and charming. Emma was excited to introduce Liam to the family, and the narrator was surprised by his demeanor. Liam was relaxed, easygoing, and seemed to be a good fit for the family. Emma led most of the conversation, and the narrator found himself wanting to talk to Liam to know more about him. Liam was different from other people, paying attention to their conversations and asking genuine questions. They were talking about movies, music, and work, and Liam was sharp, witty, and knew how to keep a conversation going. The narrator realized that Liam was not just getting along with Emma's boyfriend, but also liked him as a friend. There was something deeper and undeniable about Liam, and for the first time the narrator was not sure if this was a good thing. As dinner continued, Emma mentioned an upcoming trip to a cabin upstate, and the narrator was left feeling uneasy about Liam's relationship. The protagonist is trying to process the strange pull she feels towards Liam, a man she hasn't felt a connection with in a long time. After dinner, Emma insists they stay for drinks, and they all sank into the couch talking and laughing late into the evening. At some point, Emma curled up beside Liam, resting her head on his shoulder, and she felt a sharp pang in her chest. The more time they spent around Liam, the more she realized that this was not just a passing thought, but something real and dangerous. Emma was beyond happy that Liam and she got along so well, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Liam's conversations became more natural and casual, and the protagonist began to notice things she shouldn't notice. One night, Liam called her and asked her to come out for a drink. She hesitated for a moment before responding, but eventually decided to go out. They met at a bar near Liam's place where the music wasn't too loud and the drinks were strong. The protagonist is left feeling a sharp pang in her chest, wondering what the relationship means yet. The more time they spend together, the more she realizes that something has shifted between them. The narrator and Liam, a friend, have a difficult day at work and are unsure about their relationship. Liam is hesitant to talk about their problems, and the narrator feels a pull between them. They talk for hours, and the air between them becomes charged with something neither of them wants to acknowledge. As they walk side by side, Liam grabs the narrator's arm and they sit together, unable to move. The narrator feels the warmth of Liam's touch and the unreadable expression he gives her. They swallow hard, trying to break the moment. Liam suggests they should do this again, but the narrator is worried about the danger they have come to. The narrator has been waiting for something to snap, and one night, Emma is called into work, and Liam is invited to keep him company until she returns. The narrator should have said no and made up an excuse to avoid the situation, but Liam shows up at the narrator's apartment with a beer and a smile. They order food, play old movies, and let the conversation drift from one topic to another. The narrator keeps it casual at first, but eventually realizes she isn't really in love with Liam. The narrator's feelings for Liam and Emma become more intense as they continue to explore their relationship. The protagonist is watching a movie with Liam, who is sitting close to her. They are both aware of Liam's presence and the scent of his cologne. Liam sighs and doesn't look at the protagonist immediately, but after a long pause, he tells Emma that things weren't perfect. The protagonist is unsure what to say to Liam, as he seems to be thinking about something else. Liam tries to change the subject, but the silence between them becomes thick and charged with something unspoken. The protagonist's heart breaks when Liam touches her wrist, and she feels the warmth of his breath. He then touches her arm, and the moment they touch, Liam's lips touch her wrist, and she tries to resist him. Liam pulls back, and Liam's breath tries to linger on her skin. She swallows her chest, and Liam shook his head, running a hand through his hair. His voice is raw and shaken, and he stands up, grabbing his jacket. He leaves without saying anything, leaving the protagonist breathless. The protagonist is a young woman who has been best friends since 9th grade, and they have been inseparable ever since. However, she began to experience feelings that went beyond friendship, which she didn't want to share with herself. She believed that it didn't matter if Jake was straight because he had dated many women and had a fresh tale to share. However, she began to question herself as she noticed that Jake would swim up behind her in the water or crawl beneath the blankets with her. After work, they would go to the gym together, laughing and competing against one another. They watched a movie together, but neither of them attempted to turn in Jake at the end. Jake asked if she could take a shower, and she blinked abruptly. He chuckled as he made his way to the loo, and after a few moments the door clicked shut behind him. The protagonist cried the entire time, and her thoughts were anything but. As she walked around the flat, she had it how easily her thoughts deceived her, and how much of him was in her head these days. She heard Jake's voice calling from the loo, and she tried to keep her voice down. Jake responded, "From inside, it's not." As she pushed the towel clutch in her hands open, the protagonist's heart pounds, and she mutters curses to herself for being so upset about something. She hears Jake's voice calling from the loo, and she tries to keep her voice down. Jake responds, laughing, "It's not." The narrator's in a locker room with Jake, who has been strangely quiet lately. They are trying to get used to the warmth and smell of Jake's body wash while holding a towel in the doorway. Jake remarks that he is hanging in the air over there, and the narrator moves a little distance away. Jake's silhouette is blurred, but unmistakably tall. Jake tries to touch the narrator's hand, but his fingers linger on his skin. The narrator tries to pull away to turn and leave before doing something stupid, but Jake speaks again. He asks if she has been weird lately, but she doesn't know what to say. The truth would crack everything wide open, and the narrator is afraid to say it. Jake pulls the curtain back slightly, allowing the narrator to see his shoulder and chest glistening with water. His expression is partially visible through the haze, and he doesn't move. The silence between them is dense and suffocating, and the narrator can't breathe or move. She says, "Like you, firmer," as if saying it a second time might make the first less terrifying. Jake doesn't speak, smile, or laugh, just stands there, letting the water wash over him. He finally asks his voice low, and the narrator nods. The protagonist is in a deep, emotional moment with Jake, who is quiet and silent. They are in a shower, and Jake is unable to move or speak. The silence is deafening, and the steam curled between them like smoke from a fire. Jake turns off the water, and the silence is deafening. He pulls the curtain back, and they sit in the shower, water trickling down their skin. The protagonist is curious about Jake's behavior and why he has been acting this way. He asks her about the time she's been feeling this way and why she never told him. She is unsure how to respond, and her emotions are a mess of relief, fear, confusion, and longing. Jake hesitates for the first time, and she wonders what it would be like if he stopped himself. She is unsure if this is just one-sided, and she cannot speak. Jake reaches out, brushing lightly against her, and she nods. The air between them seems thicker, and the tile beneath her feet feels cold. The protagonist's heartbeat is erratic, trying to make sense of what has happened. Jake's eyes are warm and expressive, and she feels calm, as though some deep part of her has found an anchor in him. Despite the chaos in her head, the protagonist's body feels calm and connected to Jake, as if some part of her has found an anchor in him. Jake and the narrator share a moment of intimacy in their bathroom, where they share a warm, damp bath. The narrator is surprised by Jake's honesty and the way he admits to kissing her. They both feel a sense of anticipation and uncertainty as they decide whether to go back out into the world or stay in their small space. As they get dressed in their bedroom, the air is filled with the unspoken understanding of two people who have crossed an invisible line. Jake pulls his shirt over his head and runs a hand through his hair, looking over at the narrator. The narrator admits that this is just curiosity for Jake, something temporary, and that when it fades, they will lose Jake's grip on their hand. The narrator is scared, but Jake reassures her that this is not a passing thing, and they are not going anywhere. He then leaned back on the bed, propping himself up with one arm while rubbing a towel through his hair. The moment is filled with anticipation, and the narrator is left wondering why they waited so long to figure this out. The protagonist feels a strange shift in their world as they find themselves in a room with a damp hair and a dense air. They sit shirtless, with Jake sitting shirtless on his hips and water glistening faintly on his chest. Jake's eyes are constantly flickering, and he seems to want to say something but isn't sure if it's safe. The protagonist is startled by his directness and the way he looks at her. He admits that he might take it all back, but she doesn't want to be scared off. Jake then stands up, turning to face her more directly, and they share a moment of intimacy. Jake is always the confident, smooth guy who can flirt without flinching, but in this moment he is just as raw and vulnerable as the protagonist. He kisses her again, and they move towards the bed slowly, wordlessly asking and answering questions in touch rather than speech. The protagonist falls back against the mattress, and Jake follows, bracing himself above them with his forearms. His hair is still damp, and his chest rises and falls with shallow breaths. His expression is soft but filled with heat, and he tells her if she wants to stop. She doesn't answer with words, just pulls him down into another kiss, and the rest of the world falls away. The text describes a new experience between two individuals who are learning something about each other that has always been there beneath the surface. The moment they meet, they feel the fear recede and the rhythm of their breathing and body pressed against theirs. The silence between them becomes heavy and electric, and they both pause for a moment. Jake's lips find the woman's, and he claims the kiss is different. The woman responds with her hands, finding her jaw and pulling him closer. His mouth opens against hers, and the woman kisses him, feeling like she's suppressing this part of herself. Jake pushed her back until she hits the edge of the bed, and they pause for a moment before he follows her down. The woman is hungry in heat, and Jake whispers to her, urging her not to stop. He lays the shirt on her head, and she tries to let him pull it over her head. Jake's gaze sends fire through her chest, and he lingers kisses, dragging heat across her skin like embers. The woman arches toward Jake, without meaning to touch his shirtum. Jake and the narrator were on fire, pressed together by a warm sensation. They felt a sense of intimacy and connection, as if they were meant to be together. Jake's hands moved with confidence, and he began to touch the narrator's throat and collarbone, leaving a trail of slow kisses that were both reverent and desperate. The narrator felt a sense of vulnerability in their connection, never seen before. As they moved together, Jake's kisses grew deeper and more powerful, making the narrator feel like something he needed. They crossed the line, not rushed or forced, and it was raw, powerful, and overwhelming. Jake held the narrator like a precious person, and his breath ragged in his ear. He whispered the narrator's name repeatedly, anchoring him in his memory. The narrator saw Jake in a new light, not just as their best friend, but as someone brave enough to take this leap with them even when it terrified him. They didn't speak, and they lay tangled in each other, skin against skin. The morning after, they woke up in a different world, with Jake's arm draped over the narrator's waist, and the silence being full of something soft and real. They couldn't move, but they tried to hold on to the feeling of Jake's presence and the way he whispered their names.